Welcome everybody. This is the second part of my show for tonight. I will be talking about the game between the Panthers and the Seattle Seahawks up in Seattle this upcoming Saturday night. For those who missed it, I talked about the Ravens and the Patriots in my first segment. I'm not doing any spoiler alerts. I hope you guys are ready for this one because this is going to be another one of those games where it's going to be like two warriors just going at it, because these two teams, when they play each other, or these games are usually really tough. We got the Panthers, who are riding off their wild card victory over the Arizona Cardinals, 27-16. Cam Newton in that game, 198 yards, 2 passing touchdowns. Jonathan Stewart, 123 yards on the ground. The Rams almost beat the Seahawks in their last game in the regular season. Seattle ended up waking up in the second half, 20-6. Russell Wilson, 239 yards. Marshawn Lynch, 60 yards and a touchdown. This Seattle Seahawks team, in my opinion, may actually be a little bit better than what they were last year, to be honest with you. And here's my reasoning as to why. The reason why that I think that this team is slightly better than last year is because they know what it takes to win a championship, and they know what's expected out of each other. And I think that that's a good thing to have. Like, if you look at what the Steelers in the 70s did, when they won their first Super Bowl in 1974, they knew what it took to win the next year. This team knows what it takes to win it this year, too. Any of the teams that repeated in NFL history, they know what it takes to win a second after you win a first. Most of the same guys are there. The Legion of Boom is still there. Their linebacking core, their defensive front, their offensive line, their whole skill position set is all still there. Anyways, looking at this team right now, let's talk about the Carolina Panthers. Panthers come into this game as the number 19 scoring offense, 21.2 points per game, and they come in as the 21st scoring defense, allowing 23.4 points per game. So they're giving up a lot more points than they're allowing. Giving up a lot more points than they're scoring. Then again, they did have a losing record, and they have only had 3 wins by the start of the month of November, by the start of December, I should say. But their last 3 wins are pretty impressive. I should say 4 of them, or 5 if you want to count the playoffs. 31-point beatdown of the Saints, beating the Bucks, beating the Browns, and then just thrashing the Falcons in the Georgia Dome. Their last 2 road wins were extremely impressive. Now, the way that it's looking is they've got a team that's, similar to what it was the year before, but not quite as pronounced. Their defense isn't as good, even though it has really tightened the screws over the last few weeks of the regular season. Like, you look what it was early on in the season, the yardage they were giving up, and look what it is now. I mean, their last 4, look what they did to New Orleans. They allowed them 310 yards to New Orleans, 288 to Atlanta. They've been shutting teams down. Their offense is led by Cam Newton, completing just over 58% of his passes for 18 touchdowns and 12 picks, another average Cam Newton season. On the ground, again, he was as good as ever, racking up 539 yards and 5 scores. Jonathan Stewart, the leading rusher, with 809 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. Their 2 leading receivers actually had the same total, which is unusual. Both Greg Olsen, the tight end, and Kelvin Benjamin, their rookie wide receiver out of Florida State, 1,008 yards. Olsen with 6 touchdowns, beat Benjamin with 9. Jericho Cotchery has 580 yards on 48 catches. He was a steal in the offseason from the Steelers, and he has proven to be a very solid number 2 wide receiver. Looking down the list on their defense, in the wake of the absence of All-Pro inside lineman Greg Hardy, Charles Johnson, Mario Addison, Dwan Edwards, all those guys stepped up in a pinch, and they have produced another good season rushing the passer. 40 sacks on the year, and that has led to a couple of teams leaving black and blue when they play the Panthers, definitely. The Carolina Panthers problem, though, I'd have to say, is on defense. Their pass defense, even though that's 11th in yards allowed, is still kind of sketchy. And the reason why is this. They don't have a whole lot of interceptions. They have 14 on the year, which is, an average total in the middle of the league. But a lot of the opponents that they played recently, I know Drew Brees and Matt Ryan are good quarterbacks, but Ryan Lindley, Josh McCown, or Mike Lennon, I don't remember who started the game for Tampa, and Johnny Manziel aren't that good. So it's not like they had to get really tested. Now, thinking about it this way, the way that I see it with Carolina is that they're going to have to really play a complete game on everywhere if they want a chance to beat Seattle and Seattle. And speaking of the Seahawks, they come in bolstering the number one scoring defense, giving up just under 16 points a game. They have the 10th ranked offense in terms of points, 24.6 per game. Russell Wilson, another very solid season, 20 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, completing over 63% of his passes. Marshawn Lynch, another great year on the ground, 1,306 yards and 13 touchdowns. Through the air, it's kind of been a wide receiver by committee. You've got Doug Baldwin, who's got 825 yards. Jermaine Kearse, who's got 537. Marshawn Lynch through the air has had a decent season with 4 receiving touchdowns, which actually leads the team. And also, young guys like Ricardo Lockett have really come in and played well as well. But looking at Seattle as well, they're number 1 in yards against, number 1 in points allowed, number 1 against the pass, 3rd against the run. They have just been dominant. Their pass rush has got just as much bite as ever. Michael Bennett with 7 sacks, Bruce Irvin 6.5. And looking at their pass coverage, Richard Sherman, another all-pro year, 4 interceptions out of the best cornerback in the game. This game right here between these two teams is going to be a low-scoring affair. I've already come to that conclusion. That's not really a tough one to reach. Because let's look at the last few games that they've played against each other. The last 3 games Seattle has won. Actually, the last 4 that they've won. But let's do 3 because the last 3 were in the Russell Wilson era. Seattle's point totals, 13, 12, and 6. Carolina's point totals, 9, 7, and 12. Carolina is averaging less than 10 points a game, and Seattle is averaging about 14. The last time Carolina beat Seattle was my freshman year of high school, which was 2007. That's a long way ago, and that was 13-10. But here's the point that needs to be made clear. It's that Carolina wanted Seattle. They wanted to play the Seahawks. But the thing about it is, it's not like the games have been particularly one-sided. You look at the 2 games, look at the 3 games that they've played since Russell Wilson took over as the starting quarterback. And it's very obvious that these games have been extremely close. Like, if you look at it, the first game Russell Wilson played against, actually the most recent one this year, 13-9, which was won by the Seahawks, there was only 1 touchdown. It was from Russell Wilson late in the 4th quarter. Seattle, Carolina, again, not a whole lot of offensive yardage. 310 for Seattle, 266 for Carolina. Seahawks and the Panthers in 2013, which was the opening week of the season, 2 touchdowns total. And although Seattle had a good offensive yardage day, Carolina was really, really keen on Seattle's running game, and Marshawn Lynch was average. And you look at the 2012 game, Russell Wilson's rookie year. Seattle and Carolina, again, very little yardage. 310 for Seattle, 190 for Carolina. Cam Newton didn't have a good game, and they weren't able to move the football on the ground. So the story for these games has been this. Hold on. I'm trying to think of a really good way to put this. My opinion on these games is this. They're low scoring, they're physical, they're a beat you up kind of game. It's kind of like how the games between the Steelers and the Ravens kind of are. They're going to beat you up and they're going to be physical kind of games. That really gives a huge edge to the Seahawks because Carolina is going up against the 3rd-ranked rush defense, and they've not exactly had a lot of success running the football against the Seattle Seahawks in their 3 previous meetings. If you look at the most recent one in October, Carolina ran for 114 yards. You look at the one prior to that, in week 1 of last year, Carolina 134 yards. You look at the one prior to that, 82 yards. That's 110 yards per game. It's an average total, but then again, when you look at the fact that they're running for almost 160 on every other team in the league, it doesn't look so good now. And usually a lot of those yards are Cam Newton. A lot of those yards are made up by Cam Newton. The running backs themselves are getting shut down. D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart get pretty much cut off in those games. Looking at it from my perspective, in a game like this that features two teams that are very different. You've got a Carolina team that's very inexperienced in the playoffs and a Seattle team that just won a Super Bowl. The Seattle is the home team, Carolina is the visitor. Carolina on the road this year has been 3-4-1. And if you look at some of the games that they have played on the road this year, they've played fairly decent. Like, they tied with Cincinnati, who is also a playoff team. They destroyed New Orleans and destroyed Atlanta. So they've kind of been hot and cold the last few times they've gone on the road. But they have had some dumb losses, like Minnesota, Philadelphia, and Green Bay were all blowouts. And of course, Baltimore's a blowout. They did beat Tampa. So looking at their road success, I'm looking at it like this. They're a good team. They can travel well if they have to, but an environment like Seattle's where you can't recreate the crowd noise and you can't recreate that defense to go against. They wanted Seattle and they're going to get them, and Seattle's going to give them the boot right back to Charlotte. I'm looking for Seattle to win this game by at least 10 points. I figure this is the game where Seattle finally makes the most out of their weapons and gives Carolina a good spanking. I feel that Marshawn Lynch will be key. I feel that guys like Zach Miller, if he plays, or guys like, Jermaine Kearse, are going to be key, and Doug Baldwin as well. They're going to have some good offensive outputs. Ultimately, I'm picking Seattle to win maybe 21-10 or something like that, 21-10. I think Carolina gets a touchdown, but I think Seattle does just enough on the ground and through the air to keep them at bay. So that does it for the second part of my sports show. I will be talking about the Sunday games, which will feature the Colts and the Broncos, along with the Cowboys and the Packers. So please be sure to stay tuned and enjoy those as well.